This video is designed to give you some questions to ask yourself when you're analyzing illustrations in particular. The first thing, possibly the easiest thing to look at, is the content, starting with a very simple question. What do you see? Where does your eye go first? Is it easy to see everything, to tell what everything is? Do you get a particular emotion from the scene? And you can start getting more specific, especially if we're looking at fairy tale characters. How are people dressed? Look at Little Red Riding Hood here. She has her hood, the hood pulled up, it's buttoned in the front. Her skirt is like 15 times as wide as her head, and she has these little tiny feet. It's almost like her body has a tent around it, or armor. She's got her basket. She's got apparently an umbrella. There are these weird trees and some birds. How old does she seem? Does this content reflect what you see in the fairy tale versions you have read? So to summarize, looking at content is basically what is there. Then you can dig a little deeper and look at interactions between the characters. Are they looking at each other? From this picture, it looks like Red Riding Hood is looking sort of down in the general direction of the wolf, and he seems to be looking off this way into the distance. Does she seem to be upset or disgusted, or is she looking like, oh, cool, new pet? How's the body language? How close are they? Notice she has this umbrella or parasol that she's holding between herself and the wolf. That looks almost like it could be a weapon. So is she in a defensive posture? Does the wolf look that threatening, or does he look kind of like a scruffy dog that's lost its way in the woods and she could easily club him over the head with her basket or her pointy umbrella? These are all things you can look at, and you will need to look at when you do your compare-contrast illustration analysis. What else can you look for? The colors. First of all, is there any color? We're looking at a lot of illustrations that are pen and ink in black and white and gray. Does the overall color seem bright and cheerful? I mean, this is Little Red Riding Hood after all. Where does color direct your eyes? Your eyes might go straight to all of this bright red. And the other colors are sort of like a pale green, there's some pink. It's not very dark or ominous, it's more on the bright and cheerful side. You can ask yourself, does color indicate the most important part of the illustration? Should Little Red Riding Hood be our focus? And getting a little more technical, you can look at the balance in an illustration. Are the main figures at the top, positioned neatly in the middle, or are they at the bottom? Here, they're at the bottom. Is one figure a lot bigger than the other? Does one loom over or tower over the other? Here, Little Red Riding Hood is way bigger than the wolf. This is not true of all illustrations of Little Red Riding Hood. Sometimes the wolf is much larger than the little girl. What dominates the entire scene? Is the background sort of taking charge or control? Or is there a balance between, in this case, trees and Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf? These are just all questions you can ask yourself to get ideas and details for writing an analysis, and also just for looking more critically at artwork. Another thing you can do when you're looking at balance is consider something called the rule of thirds. What this means is you take your image or your illustration and you divide it into 3 parts on each side, which divides the whole picture into 9. When you're observing the rule of thirds appropriately, you don't want the main image here in the center. You want things to be shifted slightly. Usually people or buildings follow some sort of vertical, an up and down line. Notice how Little Red Riding Hood is right here along this line, while the wolf is sort of along the other one. In this illustration, the main action is sort of going on over here and over here, toward the bottom left. Is there a reason for that? Sometimes dividing a picture into thirds can draw your attention to things you didn't notice before. How all these birds seem to be following each other, except for this one. How this path is leading out of the picture. Maybe that's why everything is focused here at this bottom corner, because that's where the path is headed. And isn't that Little Red Riding Hood's problem? She might stray from the path. No, there isn't a lot going on in some of these squares. That's okay for an interesting illustration. Now, does any of this mean you actually like the illustration? No, these are just ways for talking more critically and technically about what's there.